Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. I want to preview the upcoming 2024-2025 NBA season with a deep dive look at who I expect to be the top 5 team defenses in the NBA. I'm extremely excited for this video as we're going to break down which teams I think will become defensive monsters this upcoming season. Obviously, some of these teams were already top 5 defenses this past season. Some of them have had some big additions to their defense, making them even better. Some of them are going to be newcomers as well to the top 5. So I'm extremely excited for this video. I hope you guys are as well. If you do enjoy the content, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. Let me know down in the comment section below who you think the 5 best defenses in the 2024-2025 NBA season will be. Without further ado, let's jump into it here now with my number 5 team, the New York Knicks. And I'm extremely excited about the direction of this New York Knicks team for a number of reasons. First of all, I think they're one of the deepest teams in the NBA when you look at their overall rotation. They are loaded. Obviously, Jalen Brunson took a discount to stay there in New York with the Knicks long term, and as a result of that decision, the Knicks are likely going to be able to keep a majority of their core together for the foreseeable future. The Nova Knicks are here to stay, and when you have players like Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, Mikal Bridges, you add in Julius Randle to that, who missed a lot of time last season, Mitchell Robinson, who missed a lot of time last season. They were able to retain Precious Achiuwa. They drafted Tyler Kolek. They also added Paco Ndadier as well. We'll see how many minutes he plays this season. I'm not expecting a ton from him. I do overall like where the Knicks are at currently with their roster, and then defensively also they have some specialists like Deuce McBride, who obviously for a long time has been regarded as one of the better defenders in basketball, even going back to his time in college hoops. Deuce McBride has been a demon on that end of the floor, and I'm very excited about the overall ability for this team to make plays defensively. Now, I do have a few reasons why I don't think that they're going to be higher than number 5. First of all, they crashed the offensive glass a ton. They had the highest offensive rebound rate in the NBA last season, which leads to some transition baskets. So if we're talking about defensive rating and allowing as few points as possible, well, if you're crashing the offensive glass, it's a good way to generate your own baskets, but time and time again, you'll be a little susceptible to giving up points in transition, especially early transition on long rebounds. So even though the Knicks generate a lot of points for themselves through offensive rebounding, and definitely still worth doing, it does jeopardize their defense just a little bit, which in my opinion bumps them down just a few spots. Last year they ranked 11th in defensive rating. As you can tell, I'm expecting them to take a big step forward. The addition of Mikal Bridges, I think, is going to be massive for them as well. Now, Mikal Bridges, his defense has slipped a little bit the last couple of years playing in Brooklyn, but I think returning back to a role similar to what he had seen himself in Phoenix as a really tremendous two-way player, someone who can play off the catch, create a jump shot in a couple of seconds if he needs to, especially late shot clock, but more so focusing on the defensive end of the floor, being a primary point of attack defender. I think we could see him kind of return to form this year, playing in New York alongside Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, who will do more of the offensive heavy lifting. Mikal Bridges kind of finds himself in the perfect spot here where he's going to have the basketball a good amount, probably more than he did in Phoenix, but not nearly as much as he did in Brooklyn. I think it's going to be better for team success, and I think the Knicks are going to reap a lot of the benefits from Mikal Bridges' presence defensively, as well as kind of the growth he's seen offensively as well as a shot creator. When the Knicks need to go to him at times, he'll be able to deliver. OG Anunoby, I think, is really the headliner, though, for the Knicks defense, and someone I had hesitated to mention up until now because I think he is the linchpin for them. When it comes to defensive versatility, he can guard up and down the lineup like none other. He can guard point guards, he can guard fours really consistently and extremely well. He is one of the most functional athletes in the entire NBA when it comes to both ends of the basketball. Offensively, he sits in the dunker spot, he cuts, he is able to play above the rim very, very well for a forward. But then defensively, it comes to his ability to play very strong with other bigger, bruising power forwards, but also have the foot speed to keep up with wings and guards. And obviously, he has so much length, he's able to play in the gaps extremely well. I just think the New York Knicks have the personnel, they have the defensive-minded coach in Tom Thibodeau to really be a defensive force. Mitchell Robinson, as a rim protector, has continued to grow and improve as a drop defender year after year after year. Now, they did lose Isaiah Hartenstein. That is a big loss for their defense. But I think even with Precious Achiuwa, they're going to be able to toggle to more switchy lineups where they have a lot of 6'5 to 6'9 kind of guys. If you have Achiuwa, Randall, Anunoby, Mikal Bridges on the floor, those four guys are extremely switchable with one another. And then from there, you could either play Brunson as kind of your offensive catalyst, or maybe you put DiVincenzo in there, who's another switchy guy. Josh Hart, who rebounds extremely well, he's switchable as well. So the Knicks just have this really long list of players who can fulfill a number of different defensive roles. I think that all in all, their offensive rebounding and the kind of rate that they play in terms of the minutes per game for some of these guys, it is going to limit how good their defense possibly is going to be in terms of the end of season defensive rating number. But when this team's locked in and when they need to get stops, they're going to be more than capable of doing just that. My number 4 team defensively this year is going to be the Orlando Magic. Now, they did finish in the top 5 last year. I believe they finished 3rd, actually. So I have them falling down just one spot, but it's not because they got worse. In fact, this team definitely improved defensively, and I want to start in that backcourt with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Jalen Suggs. Adding KCP to an already stellar defensive unit is going to be another positive addition for Orlando. And then you also look at some of their other young pieces. Anthony Black, a player who I was enamored with coming out of Arkansas, and even before that coming out of Duncanville, Texas as a high schooler. He is the real deal defensively with serious wing size as a point guard type of build. He can guard across multiple positions as well. Jalen Suggs is someone who embodies winning with the way that he plays the game defensively, the way he's willing to put his body on the line for his team to win. He's just very timely in all of his plays, it feels like. Jalen Suggs, even going back to his time in Minnesota as a high schooler, his time at Gonzaga as a one-and-done freshman, to now what he's blossomed into early in his NBA career. He just makes a lot of great plays, and he's a really good piece for Orlando's defense. But I think one of the most overlooked things when it comes to top-end defenses is the usage and the role that stars play in the defensive side of the floor. Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner are the 2 best players on the Orlando Magic, and they are both active participant defenders for this Orlando team. And with their length and size, their athleticism, Paolo Banchero is extremely strong and obviously a very good athlete. Franz Wagner is extremely lengthy, quick, and obviously has good hands and anticipation. Those 2 guys play such a pivotal role here for Orlando in being a good defense year after year, and I think Jamal Mosley's done a tremendous job with this Orlando Magic team, turning them into a team that not only defends, but defends at an extremely high level for such a young team. He's also been able to maximize their center spot with Mo Wagner playing good minutes for them off the bench. Wendell Carter as well has stepped up in a big way defensively since coming over from Chicago. I think Orlando's a very special defensive unit. I think that their overall team construct is extremely strong. Now, this year, maybe there's going to be a little bit of shifting in the way that Orlando defends, especially with some of their personnel. We'll see if Chet Howard gets more minutes and how kind of those differentiation in minutes maybe impacts their defense a little bit, because I do think that they're going to look for a little bit more offense around their star young players in Banchero and Wagner. That's where KCP, who, yes, right now has been kind of touted as a fantastic point of attack defender. In the playoffs, we saw him kind of struggle a little bit defensively, in my opinion, especially against Anthony Edwards. So I think it'll come down to what role Orlando wants KCP to play defensively. Is he going to be their primary point of attack defender, or is he actually going to be the secondary point of attack defender behind Jalen Suggs? I think once they figure out some of those questions, they'll lock into exactly who we expect them to be, which is a top 5 defense once again in the year 2024-2025. Moving on to number 3, and I have the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are actually the number 1 defense by a landslide in the 2024 season, but I have them slipping just a little bit this year. And if you look back to last year, the gap between them and the number 2 defense, the Boston Celtics, that gap was enormous. In fact, it was the same gap between the number 2 Boston Celtics and the number 10 defense Houston Rockets. So the gap between 1 and 2 was just as substantial as the gap between number 2 and number 10 in the NBA, which shows how impactful not only Rudy Gobert was for the Minnesota Timberwolves, but how bought in as a team they were on that defensive identity. That is how they won games last year. They locked down teams, especially in the fourth quarter. It just felt like they would suffocate teams down the stretch of games and really just hold them out until they couldn't get any more oxygen, they couldn't breathe anymore. It just felt like Minnesota had a way of starving off the other team's offensive attack. And obviously it all starts with Rudy Gobert in the pick and roll. He is the best drop coverage defender in this generation. He is the best defender of this generation. I don't even think it's particularly close. I know people will point to the postseason. I just want to point out he was in the conference finals. Yes, he got beat in isolation by Luka Doncic, but I could show you several clips of any single player you want in the NBA getting beat by Luka Doncic off the dribble. He averages 34 points a game for a reason, okay? I think the one concern I have about Minnesota this year, in fact, I have a couple. The first one, they lost Kyle Anderson to Golden State. Now, I think long-term for Minnesota, offensively, they could be better without Kyle Anderson. I think better spacing, a little bit more timely, quick decision play, where, Slow-Mo kind of slows things down a little bit, plays at his own pace, which is good, but it also, I think, hurt Minnesota at times offensively. So I think Minnesota's trading a little bit of their defense, letting go of Kyle Anderson, and of course bringing in Rob Dillingham, 8th overall in the 2024 NBA draft after the big trade with the San Antonio Spurs. I do think Dillingham is going to potentially jeopardize some of their team defense a little bit just because he is relatively small and slight. And that's going to, at times, cause some problems, especially as a rookie point guard. They're going to ask him to guard up and down the lineup a little bit, depending on matchups. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels, those two guys most typically guard the other team's best ball handler, best player, which means Dillingham might at times be asked to guard shooting guards or small forwards, especially, say you're playing the Milwaukee Bucks. Jaden McDaniels is probably going to be on Damian Lillard. So then you have questions of who's guarding Gary Trent Jr., who's guarding here, who's guarding there. It kind of moves your positional flexibility around a little bit. So Dillingham's slight frame and slight size could become a problem for Minnesota's team defense a little bit, which is why I have them dropping from that dominant number 1 spot down to number 3 here. And I also have questions about if they're going to be able to sustain that identity that won them so many games last year. Of course, that was the heart of the team, was getting stops, winning on the defensive end of the floor. With a little bit of a personnel change and an offseason in between, will they be able to keep that same focus, that same level of effort on the defensive end of the floor as Anthony Edwards takes another step towards superstardom? Does he kind of slack off a little bit more defensively? Right now there's this narrative that Anthony Edwards is this premier defender. I do not believe that at all. I do think he makes some superhuman plays defensively, and at times when he is engaged, especially on ball defensively, he has all of the physical tools to be one of the best defenders in the NBA. But the issue is the focus. He is not consistently that type of player. Jaden McDaniels is one of the best point of attack defenders in the league, with the ability to also make plays as a weak side defender and off-ball player filling in the gaps. I think he does extremely well there. But again, like I've said for many months now, and especially in this video, Rudy Gobert is the identity of this team. This team goes as far as Rudy Gobert is capable of going. And even though Anthony Edwards is going to be the best player this upcoming season, Rudy Gobert is the linchpin for the way that the Minnesota Timberwolves win or lose games. I also do think there is a little bit of a concern I have about Karl-Anthony Towns defensively. Teams like the New Orleans Pelicans and Sacramento Kings last year were really able to exploit him through some of their zoom actions and the speed, the quickness with which they played, and their pace, putting Karl-Anthony Towns in ball screens. That's extremely bad for Minnesota, whether he's guarding centers and he's the drop defender in a lot of cases. That's not good, which is why Minnesota brought in Rudy Gobert to begin with. Or if he's actually the big man getting screened when he's guarding fours, especially against teams like New Orleans and Sacramento, like I referenced, he was attacked a ton. And he really struggles to navigate screens and maneuver those screens, and you can expect that. He's a 7-footer. That's not his fault, but that is one of the flaws in Minnesota's team building defensively. With Karl-Anthony Towns likely still on the roster next season, more teams will have better scouting reports on how to attack Karl-Anthony Towns and the Minnesota Timberwolves And I do think there will be some things for other teams to attack and go at that will cause Minnesota and Chris Finch some real problems on their roster. The number 2 team I have is the Boston Celtics, who have actually finished second 2 years in a row under head coach Joe Mazzulla. The Boston Celtics continue to be a perennially great defensive team, and this is something that does not get talked about enough. In fact, most of the time, I feel like anytime I hear any type of coverage or analysis around the Boston Celtics, it is almost always discussing their offensive talent, their offensive game plan, their offensive style, where they shoot a ton of threes, and at times I've been guilty of that as well. But we do need to take a second to just appreciate Boston for their defensive dominance. They are one of the best defensive teams over the last few years. There's been a real stretch run here, even going back to when Ime Udoka was the head coach, of the Boston Celtics being one of the premier defensive teams in the NBA. It doesn't get talked about enough, but it really starts with their defensive backcourt. I talked about Jalen Suggs and KCP for the Orlando Magic and how special that defensive backcourt might become. Well, you want to turn the volume up by like 1,000? That's what Drew Holiday and Derek White are for the Boston Celtics. They are just both defensive menaces, and they both do it in different ways. Drew Holiday was kind of the little bit of a, kind of scheme X's and O's cheat code this past year for Joe Mazzulla. At times he'd put him in the middle of their defense as a 2-1-2 zone user, which is crazy to have a 6'3" point guard in the middle of your zone. It worked. At times, Drew Holiday would guard Karl Anthony Towns. Sometimes he would guard Julius Randle. Sometimes he would guard Jalen Brunson. He was guarding 1 through 4 extremely consistently, guarding some 7-footers, guarding some guys who are 6'1", and he succeeded pretty much in every single matchup. Drew Holiday is one of the most special defenders we've had in the last 10 years. I don't think I need to tell any of you that. You guys all know that. But then you pair him with a 6'5" guard in Derek White, who has extremely unbelievable positional size and defensive playmaking capabilities. As an event creator defensively, he has extremely active hands, fantastic anticipation as a shot blocker, probably the best shot blocking guard since either John Wall or Dwayne Wade. Your choice there on which one you want to go back to. But Derek White is just a tremendous defensive player, and having those two guys really being the fear-mongers of your defense, because you can pick up 94 feet with them, you can use them in so many different ways, and you can switch up your matchups anytime you'd like with those two, because they can guard up and down lineups with ease. It gives Joe Mazzulla a really easy job to figure out defensive assignments when your whole team can guard, especially when your guards can defend up in size. It just gives you so much extra added flexibility in the way that your team is going to be able to defend. I also don't think enough love is given to Kristaps Porzingis as a defender. He's an extremely special defender. At 7'3", finally allowed to play center, something I was clamoring for back when he was a Dallas Maverick. I think his just sheer size and rim protection was really instrumental in Boston winning their first championship. So why do I think that maybe they're not the number 1 team defensively this year? I think maybe there's a slight lull after winning a championship, that, hey, the regular season, we won 64 games last year. We were a really great regular season team. We got to the playoffs and we continued rolling from there. Maybe there's a little bit less emphasis this season on the regular season for them. Now, that doesn't mean that's 100% going to happen. It's not like I'm expecting a huge drop-off here. I still have the Celtics as the number 2 defense, and a big reason for that, just like, again, how I referenced with Orlando, having your star wings, your star offensive players involved defensively moves mountains in the NBA. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, 2 very good defenders as well. Jaylen Brown at times defensively struggles off the basketball, but I think we see when he's locked in and engaged how impactful he can be, even going to the NBA Finals with the work he did against Luka Doncic. He was just tremendous in the NBA Finals, en route to winning Finals MVP. And then Jason Tatum is someone who I think leverages his size, strength, and rebounding extremely well to be impactful on the defensive end of the floor, as well as both a playmaker, an on-ball defender, and kind of giving, again, more versatility to Joe Mazzulla in the NBA Finals. He guarded Derek Lively, something I had predicted would happen ahead of the NBA Finals, just because of the matchups and keeping Porzingis out of the pick and roll in certain instances. Now, Dallas has a new cheat code to that. We'll talk about that in another video. If they were to rematch today, I think it would be a little bit different. But all in all, I do think that the Boston Celtics are still a force to be reckoned with in the Eastern Conference. But the number 1 team in the NBA defensively for me is the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I don't think this should be any surprise for anyone. The OKC Thunder were one of the best defenses in the NBA last season as an extremely young team with a rookie starting center and a few massive flaws as well. Their defensive rebounding especially stands at the forefront of one of their biggest problems. But if you look at their overall defensive profile, they were still extremely good defensively in spite of their rebounding struggles. And one of their biggest strengths that led to them being such a good defensive team was the amount of turnovers they could generate, the event creation on the defensive end of the floor. And the nice thing is they got stronger in that area with the addition of Alex Caruso, and they also addressed their rebounding flaw in a big way, signing Isaiah Hartenstein to a big contract this offseason. I talked about him as a big loss for the New York Knicks, who I had as the 5th best defense coming into this year. The Oklahoma City Thunder are the best defense in the NBA, in large part because of their existing talent: Jalen Williams, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Chet Holmgren. Really, that three-headed monster is all very active defensively. Lou Dort might be one of the best, if not the best, individual point-of-attack defenders in the NBA because refs allow him to play extremely physically. He's very strong, he has great anticipatory skills, and he's extremely athletic. Something I don't think gets talked enough about in terms of his own individual game and the athleticism that he plays with in functional ways. But then they added in two guys who are going to be extremely impactful for them. Isaiah Hartenstein is going to help anchor their defense quite a bit as a shot blocker, and most importantly as a rebounder and a guy who's going to box out other players extremely well. Now, I do think they're going to miss Josh Giddey's rebounding a little bit. That was one of their big helpers with their rebounding rate last year, was having a guard who could grab 6, 7, 8, 9 rebounds a game at times. They don't have that anymore. But what they do have is one of the best individual defenders in the entire NBA in Alex Caruso, who I had picked as an all-defense member last year. He ultimately did make all-defense, I believe, and deserved to with his overall tape and the type of player he is defensively. He's just extremely impressive. You think about his on-ball capabilities, he's switchable. Again, this has been a big thing when you talk about one of the best or some of the best guard defenders in the NBA. It's about being able to guard up the lineup, and Alex Caruso can do that. He can guard 1 through 4 rather consistently. He's got elite foot speed to be able to keep up with some of the fastest point guards in the NBA. He's got extremely good screen navigation capabilities, and I think the one thing that really stands out to me the most watching him is the activity of his hands. He gets a ton of strip downs. He gets his hands in the passing lanes. He fills the gaps extremely well with his hands. And that's partially what makes him such a good off-ball defender too. He's got all of the off-ball positioning IQ to be extremely impactful when he's not defending the basketball. But when he is defending the basketball, he's got the screen navigation skills, the foot speed, and then the activity in his hands to make plays on that end of the floor as well. So a team that was already the best in the NBA at creating turnovers, creating and generating events defensively, well, they added a guy who's going to make them even better in that area. They added a rim protector. Now, I do think the addition of Isaiah Hartenstein is going to significantly hurt their offense at times. I think especially with Chet Holmgren on the floor, I think that's going to be a little bit of a dilemma that Mark Daigneault has to solve. If you want to know why I think that, go back to Kristaps Porzingis playing the power forward for Dallas, not center. Now, the one difference here is Isaiah Hartenstein's a lot better of a center than Dwight Powell was. So even though OKC is going to have some new problems with Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren sharing the floor at times, I also think that the overall benefit of those two guys playing together defensively is going to be at times fear-mongering for teams. So I don't think it's a cripple. In fact, I do think it makes OKC better, just in different ways. So we'll have to see how their defense really emerges and evolves, and how their offense changes with Chet Holmgren playing more minutes at the power forward this year. Not all the time. He's going to be a center still, don't get me wrong. But at times, Chet Holmgren's going to have to play the 4. So how does that look? How does that play? And now against teams like Minnesota and Denver, that could be extremely successful. Against some other teams like LA, maybe the Clippers, for example, that could look a little bit different. So we'll have to see exactly how they go about utilizing those lineups, utilizing those minutes. But I am extremely excited about Oklahoma City's defense this year. I think that if you had to bet right now who's going to win the most games in the Western Conference, I think OKC is very well positioned because they're still a young team. They're a very hungry team. They're looking to win a lot of regular season games and continue to prove themselves both individually and as a unit. And I think with some of the new additions, some of the veterans they brought in, and getting rid of the Josh Giddey offensive problem, I think that they're going to find themselves in a very good situation to win a lot in the Western Conference, and especially win a ton of games based on their defense. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. Again, let me know down in the comment section below, who do you think the top 5 defenses are going into this upcoming NBA season? Thanks again, everyone, so much, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.